Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and religion. We're going to take it all very, very seriously, but not too seriously. This week, I bring you another guest to discuss, in excruciating detail, The Bachelorette, and a brief word on cable news and friends of the show, Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson. Let's begin.
Act 1. Please stick around and listen even though my guest and I talk about The Bachelorette for 45 minutes.
Welcome to the program, Bethany Hendricks. Bethany is a wife, a mother, was a successful professional executive for over 20 years, and decided, in the midst of all of her accolades, to change careers to become a clinical physician. And Bethany is also a huge fan of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. One of those things is not like the others. Welcome to the show, Bethany Hendricks.
Well, thank you so much. I have to correct you, though. You said a clinical physician, and I'm in a psychology program. So close, but not exactly a physician. So I'm training to become a marriage and family therapist.
Okay, explain in 8 seconds the difference between a clinical physician and a clinical psychologist.
A physician is a doctor. I'm not a doctor. Like, a physician is like your primary care physician that you go to see when you have a cold. You come to me if you have anxiety, which you might.
I do have anxiety after having watched this television program called The Bachelorette for but 3 episodes.
You've been struggling, I know. So let's talk about it.
So I do want to introduce to my audience, the 10 or 12 of them that are actually going to listen to this. We did have a room, you and I, on Clubhouse where we were going to discuss each week's episode. And I believe over the course of the 2 weeks we did that, we had one person enter the room that we didn't know.
Right. My friend. Was it bad that I outed that was my friend? Yes, but here's what I will say. I think the Clubhouse format is terrific, and I think we had some really kind of bright conversation throughout it. It's just, I don't think we've cracked the code yet. But that's okay. We'll talk about it today.
Well, yes, I will say that we are not Clubhouse veterans. Neither one of us has been on the forum that long, and I know that I'm no marketing guru by way of the fact that I can only get the 10 to 12 people that I know to listen to this podcast in the first place. So, but I found you. The sky's the limit when it comes to the reach of this podcast.
All right.
All right is right. So, yes, I'm undergoing anxiety. I'm not going to pay you, but you can actually put this down on your resume as a therapy session. This show literally is turning my hair white. It stresses me out. And one of the things that I've been harping on to you that I think you've started to notice, but it really doesn't bother you like it bothers me, is the fact that the music is laughable. It's laughably bad. This is a Mexican telenovela. It's just dressed up like it has some sort of production value and that there's some underlying or fundamental storyline beyond some crappy script that love, then hate, then love, then hate. That's all this is. And then they have the music to cue you in as to what emotion you're supposed to feel as the scene changes. Tell me I'm wrong.
So I know you hate the music, but I would back up for just a moment and say the fundamental difference between me and you and how we orient to the show is not about the music. I actually think people can go on this show and fall in love. And I think it happens. And the evidence that I like to keep presenting to you is that it has happened. And the point at which they have babies, I'm all in. Like, at that point, you're not faking it. You're not doing it for Instagram followers anymore. At that point, that is some real life. So I love it because you get to watch from the very beginning moments when two people might meet each other, have a little spark, develop a relationship, a lot of drama, maybe some fashion along the way too. So there's a lot of different aspects of the show that I would admit to liking. But in the end, what I root for is that somebody falls in love. And sometimes they do. Now, the tough thing is you haven't seen the show before, so you've never seen that journey. And what you're stuck in right now is week 3. So we've just watched the 3rd episode. And it is campier at the beginning. It definitely is more of a, I don't know, what did you call it? A soap opera?
A Mexican telenovela. Yes.
Okay. So there may be some tone to that, but to answer your question directly about the music, I just like to be led to tell what I'm supposed to feel at a certain moment. I don't really notice it. I don't really mind it.
Okay, well, it is disgusting, and I find it as over the top as I find the program. I find the music even worse because half the time I know I am in defiance of the very premise of the show, because what's happening on the screen has music to connote or denote this is bad, this is sad.
Every show. Have you ever watched a horror movie with the sound muted? It's not scary.
Agreed, but that's usually because most horror movies are atrocious. And so they have to tell you when they want you to get scared, because what you see on the screen isn't going to merit it. That's how I feel about The Bachelor well, I can't say about The Bachelor. I've never watched that. But that's how I feel about this Bachelorette program. While they're supposed to be crying, and while there's supposed to be tension, and while there's supposed to be concern, I'm laughing. I'm laughing out loud. If I were sitting there on the couch next to you watching this program, and particularly anybody else in your family who's interested in this program, you would immediately kick me out of the room, because you'd be so disgusted by my reaction to what I'm seeing on the screen. It would take you out of the moment that you're experiencing watching this program.
Yeah. So here's the problem. I don't know if this season is even going to work, because there is, and by work I mean finding love in the end. There is a rumor that they wrapped up production early. So either that means everything falls apart, or she finds the guy who she wants and she says, no reason to keep playing this game. This is the guy who I'm meant to be with. I don't know which way it's going to go, but if it does go the way of the whole thing implodes, then you'll have, more fuel for your fire to say that the whole thing was a sham and stupid and whatever. But there have been many cases where really nice relationships have come of it, and marriages and, lifelong things.
Nice long things?
Lifelong.
Oh, lifelong things. Okay. Well, whether it's lifelong things or nice long things, the point I've made to you in the past is there's many relationships that have formed from a chance meeting in a gas station than there are Bachelorette seasons or Bachelor seasons where there have been marriage and babies. I think just the very fact that some people actually do fall in love and have children does not warrant all of the attention that this show gets. Or, and this is what I don't understand about you, your affinity for the possibility that will be an outcome of the show. In other words, why don't we just put candid camera in gas stations and see how many people meet that way and whether or not any of them fall in love? Because I'm sure the drama involved at people meeting in a gas station is going to be much higher and much more real than the drama that you're going to get on this television program, which, by the way, I have to get into with you about on this third episode.
No, your gas station show would be a very boring show. I would not watch that show. But I am saying, if there were a way other than this to have a front row seat to watch the entire arc of a relationship developing from meeting to engagement, I'm sure it would be compelling. I think they do it in a curated way, right? They bring in people that they think will be of interest to the lead. So in this case, Katie is the Bachelorette this season. So they've brought in guys that they think she'll be attracted to. And I'm sure they've asked her questions about what's your type? What physical type do you like? What kind of personality do you like? And then they try to stack the deck to make that possible for her to find someone she would like. And like you and I've talked about before, most people on the show are pretty good looking too. So it's not just like being at the DMV or at the gas station. If you had a curated group of 35 women from whom you could, I don't want to say choose, but people who you could get to know, I think you would really enjoy that.
If I put 35 attractive males and 35 attractive females into a situation whereby they were all running out of gas and had to go to one gas station, I feel that I would get the same kind of results that you're getting in taking them to some beautiful resort in Taos, New Mexico, which, by the way, they don't deserve. They absolutely do not deserve to be there. That's a testament to the popularity of the show, though, where they can go to a resort like that, and the resort is like, of course we would have you produce your show, film your show at our resort It's going to popularize it. But the idiots that are actually staying there, not deserved. Not deserved.
So one thing you're missing out on because of the effects of COVID is that generally this show does a lot of traveling. And one of the cool things about the show and things that I love about it is that you do get to see a lot of different destinations. It's kind of like a travel show and a love show all wrapped into one. So yeah, this idea that they're at a destination, even though you're saying it's a beautiful one, it's a little bit more static than before where they would go to a lot of different places. So just know you're missing out on that right now too. Maybe by the next season, they'll be on the move again. So you might need to watch Michelle's season next.
All right. So one, I'm troubled that these people get to stay in numerous high-end resorts, of which, absent their participation on this show, they probably could not afford. And two, I'm even more disturbed that you already know the name of this woman who's going to be on the next season. How the hell do you know that?
How do I know that? Because both Katie and Michelle were on the previous season of The Bachelor. So Matt James's season, they were both contenders. And instead of, normally when they wrap a season, like when they wrapped Matt's season, they would name one Bachelorette to be on the next season. But for some reason, they felt like they were both worthy. And I don't know, there were probably different reasons for that.
This is like The Hills, or one of those stupid shows on MTV where everyone just dates everyone else in a certain clique, right?
Okay, I actually don't watch that show, so I don't know. Is that a reality show or is that a scripted show?
I look, you're asking the wrong person, but from my understanding is they just have this group of people and they all ended up dating each other. It's like it's not a true representation of the dating pool. You just take a bunch of pretty people, you put them in kind of a clique, and then they just kind of circulate amongst themselves. Is that how you find love? My gas station show is looking better and better every time because we're going to get 35 different people every season on the gas station show. Beat that.
All right, I'll tune in. I'll have to see if I like it. One thing that I really like about The Bachelor that you don't get on The Bachelorette, though, is the fashion. So when there's 35 women, you get to see all of their dresses, all of their outfits, and I really enjoy that part. My daughter enjoys that part, too. Not to make it sound even more superficial, because I'm sure you don't give a whit about that either, but your gas station show is going to have no good fashion, I guarantee it.
That is me banging my head on my table, listening to you talk about the fashion. Okay, fine. I'll have everybody in the gas station TV show. It won't be their own automobiles. It'll be Hummer stretch limos that run out of gas, right? And the premise will be that they're all going to prom because, again, I've told you several times, this show reminds me of high school. And it'll be a bunch of different people who are missing their prom date because the limo's running out of gas. Boom. You got a Clark bar, you get a Gatorade, and there's another girl in there in her prom dress.
Okay, here's what I'm going to give you, Patrick. I'm going to keep it real by saying this particular week, week 3, there was a lot of stuff I didn't like. So I've just mentioned what I do like about the show and why I've watched the show. And I think literally I've watched every season since it started because the first season...
It surely sounds like it. You know everybody's name. And you can call them out by name, saying the name season. I mean, that's one of the things. You were a professional executive, then you quit and you start studying to be a psychologist, right? Clinical psychologist. I did make that mistake in the beginning. How do you remember every one of the seasons of these jackasses, male and female, from 10 years ago?
No, some of them I do forget. Some I do, but I watched them all. But I remember a lot of the ones that were successful, and some of them, maybe I follow them on Instagram or something, so I keep up on them, see their kids.
See, that's what social media is, the cesspool that I always thought it was. That's what you're doing. You're following these people, and what did I say? They're all in it to get on social media and start some sort of side hustle or, I don't know, video service where they can just all make money. And yes, maybe that's what I need to do in my gas station show, that somehow it's going to be a spinoff where you're going to be able to get higher levels of Instagram and YouTube and Facebook followers, and then maybe love will come of it too, right?
But so in the very beginning, 20 years ago, there wasn't the pressure of social media or the lure of social media. So over time, that may have become more of a dominant force. But even now, if you have 35 people, maybe 3 or 4 of them might be lucky enough to emerge as the new influencer on social media. But I think most of them return to normal lives for the most part afterwards. Maybe, a couple achieve some level of fame. But here's what I want to give you. For this week, for this particular week, there were a couple of things that I thought were horrible. So the first was that they did sort of this, speaking of therapy, they did sort of this group therapy session where they brought back a previous bachelor, Nick Viall, who I like, but he was not good on this episode, as the moderator or the facilitator or the kind of faux therapist of this setting to facilitate the session where everyone was supposed to say what the red flags were about themselves. Like, oh, I used to cheat on my girlfriend, or sometimes I like to lead people on, or whatever, right? And it was a cry fest. It was forced. I thought it was ugly. What did you think?
First of all, don't get me into a situation where I'm watching 7 or 8 grown men cry and hug one another, and that's supposed to be compelling television. I agree with you. I thought there were a couple of these guys who volunteered things authentically, but the rest of it looked forced and weird. And again, what are they doing on that program in the first place? I mean, you're telling me they're trying to find love. I guess that's going to help their Instagram following. The second thing that struck me as soon as it started to happen, tell me you've seen the movie Old School.
Yes.
Okay. And it goes right to the part with Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell going with his wife to the therapist. Remember the trust tree? And the story where he's telling, we go to the Applebee's.
I just remember him running naked down the street. I don't remember the therapy session. What happened?
Well, the therapy session where he's talking about going to, I can't remember if it was Applebee's or if it was Chili's or something like that, but going in there with his wife, having dinner, and then wondering what the waitress's panties were, whether they were traditional white panties or it was a sexy bikini or, a thong. And that's exactly so I started laughing. And here these guys are pouring out their souls, right, to try to impress this girl and let her know, oh, I'm so honest and I can be authentic in front of you. And I'm just channeling over and over a loop in my head, Will Ferrell going, I thought we were in the trust tree. I thought we were in the nest. I mean, so I thought it was absurd. And again, I haven't watched the show before, whether it be The Bachelorette or The Bachelor. I didn't know this wasn't par for the course. So it soured me on the entire thing.
I wasn't buying it. But I would like to talk about Carl because that part I really did enjoy.
Okay,
do you remember who Carl is?
The only people that are striking me in this show as to, I can remember their names, are the ones that are doing stuff that is so over the top and stupid that I do remember who Carl is. And so Carl, for people who are not watching the show, and I hope to God every one of my listeners falls into that category. For people who are not watching this show, basically in episode 2, he goes and whispers into this girl's her name is Katie. I should probably start using her name. He whispers into Katie's ear, not all of these guys are here for the right reason. Which is, and I started laughing because as Bethany and I spoke about in our clubhouse room after the episode, none of these people is here for the right reason. They're all here to get Instagram followers. So in that sense, they're all there for the right reason. But that's neither here nor there. He plants this seed in her head. She starts boo-hooing. Oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And I'm laughing the whole time. Then cue to the episode number 3. You've got this boo-hoo fest from the guys because I guess the producers are trying to premise this season on authenticity and honesty is so important to this girl. And yet all someone has to do is say, I don't think everybody here is honest. And then she falls apart, which, again, you're assuring me, Bethany, that this show is not all staged and fake, but just the way it's presented, it looks like it's all staged and fake. And then this guy who does nothing more than plant the most simple of seeds, and I think this is indicative of who Katie is. I don't think that she's the sharpest knife in the drawer. I've said that to you before, Bethany. She completely falls apart, and then he fails to identify in front of the group of men who he believes is not being authentic. Yes? Is this a pretty good bird's eye view of what happened or summary.
Yes.
So then, in my favorite part of the show so far, he goes off camera and goes into another room, and based on the level of conflict that he experienced with these other guys who were yelling at him and telling him he's an idiot and that there really is, he doesn't authentically think that there's somebody who's not there for the right reasons. He's just doing that to stir the pot. He goes into another room and begins to shadow box, as if he's going to have to fight off the rest of the male contestants on the show. Again, laugh out loud. Tell me that you were laughing when he was doing that.
No, I agree, but don't you think that is kind of entertaining? So he was not going to be the guy, and we find out in this episode he's not the guy. She sends him home. But the fact that you laughed out loud at a television show, I call that a win. I call that some entertainment with maybe love at the end. It's a bonus.
Okay, I see where you're going with that, but this is laughing. It is not positive, reinforcing, genuine laughter. I am embarrassed that I'm laughing at somebody, not laughing with somebody.
I think there can be an element to this show that is that. And I think many people who enjoy the show would admit that that is part of the sauce that is attractive. Yeah.
Well, don't you then feel like this has some sort of correlation? Like you're no different than a viewer of Jerry Springer?
But nobody falls in love on Jerry Springer. Nobody has babies after they go on Jerry Springer's show.
I disagree with you completely. In fact, half the people on Jerry Springer were there because of copulation and procreation, and there being some level of uncertainty as to who copulated with who and who procreated with who.
I guess there's a point there. So yeah, the shadow boxing was stupid, for sure. And what we've seen on this show over and over again is whoever becomes the whistleblower, it never ends well for them. So I don't know why people continue to do that. It's never good intentions usually on their part. It is sort of a power move or an attention move on their part, but it puts them into this different role. They're no longer a contender. They're the informant, and either the lead will keep them around because they want more information, or in this case, there was like a revolt where all of the guys said, he's got to go. Like, this guy's a loser. And they basically told Katie, you have to get rid of him, which that was unusual. But I am kind of glad she did. I think she made the right choice.
But only after the guys came and told. I mean, this girl has a bad radar for guys. Let's just. That's one of the things I actually wrote in my notes after this episode that I wanted to talk to you about. And this is something that we haven't talked about yet. Does this girl have a good radar for guys? Because after the guys come out and say, yeah, he went and stirred the pot, we don't believe him. We don't even believe that he said it believing that it's true. He just said it to stir the pot, and we think you should send him home. She goes out to the two girls. Don't ask me to recite their names. That they're replacing the other guy. Don't ask me to recite his name. Guy who's not on the show anymore. Okay.
Replacing Chris Harrison. Go ahead.
Okay. So two girls replace guy. She goes out to talk to two girls and says, guys tell me Carl needs to go. I was going to keep him, but now I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
He was a douche before he went in there and sat down with her and clowned her. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm not sure why she was struggling with that, but I will say that I think it's hard to judge if she has a good radar for guys. I don't know. I do think when you are that person, you're the single person as the lead of the show. So she's the one woman with, starting with 35 men. And she really is in a place where she's saying, I'm trying to put my heart on the line. I'm trying to find love. And that means vulnerability. That's scary. And if you feel like there are bad actors in the 35, and the reality is there probably are some. Some aren't there for the right reasons. They have a music career, or maybe what you're saying, they're looking for Instagram followers, whatever. She's trying to sniff that out, and it's easy, I think, to become paranoid about who's the good and who's the bad. How do I really figure that out in the moment? And I think it's enticing when someone comes to you and says, I have information to help you figure that out. Because you're thirsty for it. You're like, yeah, help me understand. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? I want to know the difference.
I appreciate you saying that, but what did he follow it up with? I'm not going to name names. So, and maybe this is because we're dealing with a bunch of young people, but if someone comes and has a big reveal to you, and the big reveal is, I don't think everybody is authentically here to fall in love with you, and you say, oh my God, that's terrible. Well, who is it? Well, I can't tell you. What do you mean you can't tell me?
I will add, though, that in other seasons where they have named names, it ends equally badly for that person, because then it becomes a one-on-one situation. Why did you say that about me? What were you saying about me? And it just flares from there. So it's good neither way.
Well, agreed. Your parents are right. Nobody likes a tattletale, but you're not even being a tattletale if you come in and say, I don't think that everybody here is here for the right reason. Again, laughably, that reason being love. But then you don't even name a name. And when you're confronted, even by the other guys, you still can't name a name. So it to me, that showed a lack of maturity on the part of at least one person, this girl, Katie, that she couldn't see through, okay, he's saying this, I feel this, but the fact that he can't even point a finger, there's something wrong with that.
But he was disgusting in episode 2. Do you remember? He was the one that was like, he had that banana and he was shaking her picture like he was having sex with her and talking about, like, intimating that they were having sex for 17 hours in a row or something. It was gross.
He's a douche.
Yeah. So
I identified this very quickly on.
This episode was by hook or by crook, he's out of there. And I felt like it was a team effort. The guys definitely kind of teamed up against him, and she finally caught a clue that this was not the guy for her. So that felt satisfying to me, that he was gone. The only thing I will miss is he was Carl with a K, and my niece just got a French bulldog, and it's named Carl with a K.
I don't see how that correlates, but
I just thought it was funny. The dog's name is actually Carl with a K. Not just that's how they spell it. They call him Carl with a K. So I don't know. I guess I just kind of liked it because it reminded me of the bulldog. But yeah, he was awful. So that was good riddance. But otherwise, I don't think there was much to love in this episode. So we'll have to just see where it goes from here, because maybe things get back on track. I think I like Katie more than you do. I think she's a good girl. And I think maybe what you didn't see was in Matt James's season, the women on that season were super petty, and there was a lot of bullying going on, and I do not use that term loosely. They were awful to one another. And Katie was sort of this lone voice of reason that stood up and said, you guys, why are we treating each other this way? This is ridiculous. And so I did admire how she showed up in that season. I think that's a big reason why she ended up as one of the Bachelorettes, was because she really showed some very admirable qualities during that season, and she kind of stood alone. People were in that mob mentality, and she stood out as someone who was brave enough to say, this is not cool. So I like her for those reasons, but we'll see. I'm not sure where this one's headed, honestly. Your first season, and it's a little shaky. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not saying I don't like this girl, but one of the things that I think this program does is you're either rooting for people or you're rooting against people, right? And in terms of this girl being a bachelorette, of having these decisions to make, one of the things that we discussed in the clubhouse room that, of course, no one listened to, we'll have to recap very quickly. One of the first things that I wrote down about this girl in their little montage about who she is, in introducing her and introducing this season of the show, I wrote down, this girl is a dork, right? And we had a whole conversation about that. She's kind of a dork. There's nothing wrong with that. She's just kind of a dork. And I don't know the kind of a dork. I think the actual note, I'm looking right now. Oh, I wrote down, this is just a pretty dork. So she's a pretty dork. That doesn't mean that she isn't an authentic person. I think she is a genuine person. I just also think that she's a pretty dork. Going after the guy in the cat suit, I'm still really struggling with it. I don't get it.
Connor B. And when they kiss, it's disgusting. Have you noticed that? There's a lot of tongue happening those two get together. I do not enjoy that.
Well, it looks like both of them, this is their third relationship. I can't stress enough to you how often I'm writing in my notes, this is high school. This is high school. They are two of the clumsiest kissers I've ever seen in my entire life. And she is much better to be led than to lead in that regard. So some of the guys you see her kiss, it looks like, oh, these are two adults who've maybe kissed more than one person in their entire life. When those two get together, I don't know that, Connor hasn't been kissing a fire hose his whole life, but how he developed that technique, it's beyond me.
Yeah, that's a little aside for sure. It's not good. But going back to Katie, when you say she's a dork, maybe I like her for that reason. Maybe I'm a dork and I sort of relate to her. The one thing that I'm not certain how it's going to play out for her is much has been made of her sex positivity. And again, that goes back to the previous season where she was on Matt James's season. She showed up with a dildo coming out of the limousine. And so that was characterized as, oh, she's so sex positive. She's so confident about her sexuality. And I don't really know that I'm buying that. I think that she showed up with a dildo, which was a bold move, but I'm sure producers may have influenced that too. She might have had this kind of funny idea and they played off of it and ended up with that. But in terms of her being like the flag carrier for sex positivity, I'm not sure that I'm buying that 100% yet, but we'll see. And I don't know that she necessarily should have to be the mayor of Sexville. I mean, I don't know,
Okay, I'm glad you brought this up because I actually wrote this down in my notes after episode 3. This is one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you.
Okay.
I'm not buying it at all. It's one of those things where it's something that someone says and someone is trying to exude when it is in fact the exact opposite about how they feel, particularly about themselves. So let's not look at Katie and sex positivity. As a man, I immediately correlated in my own mind, this is likes to fight guy, right? This is macho guy. Macho guy is usually out there in the club or the bar or at the sporting event or whatever, and he's causing a lot of trouble because macho guy, bigger than most other people, maybe he's exercising a lot, very strong, what have you, but has deep-seated insecurities. And that's usually what's pressing this machismo, this outward attitude of conflict and hostility in order to get attention, in order to self-validate. So that's how I see it for this girl. She is not the mayor or mayoress, however you want to put it, of sex positivity. In fact, she's awkward as hell. This girl, put her in one of those dresses that you see these other two girls wearing, and she doesn't wear that dress as someone who is sleek and elegant and body positive and sex positive. She wears it like a 26-year-old dork who is trying to look pretty.
Well, I think she is beautiful, and I think she has a lot to offer, but I do feel kind of bad for her if she's been put into this box of like, this is your persona, and it doesn't exactly fit. And now knowing what she shared during this episode about being the victim of sexual assault, maybe she is. I mean, what you said is very insightful. Maybe she is just swinging that pendulum a little far the other way, like, look how much I can love sex and how much I can embrace it, and that may be an overcompensating technique. Maybe you should be a clinical physician, Patrick, also known as a psychologist.
Is that you teasing me because I made one mistake? I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit this so that I take that out. And no, I don't mind making that mistake. So I am not terribly insightful. When things drop on my head like an anvil, I actually look up and say,
You pick it up then?
Yes, yes.
So that's what this is? This is some in-your-face insight? Okay.
Well, again, I'm not saying that I don't think she's attractive. I think that she's extremely classically attractive. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a dork. But I'm here watching this program. I'm evaluating her as a contestant. Why? Because when I see these guys that she's gravitating to, I don't think that this is, it's linear in my mind. This all makes sense. She goes to the guy in a cat costume, and that's who she resonates with. She goes to the guy who gives her a macaroni necklace from this niece or whatever the hell was the posture that he took when he gave it to her, and that resonates with her. So, she is who she is. I'm not criticizing her for that, but I do have to evaluate it in the terms of, first of all, I'm watching this program, it disgusts me, and then I'm watching her gravitate towards these guys, and it's literally like, said this to you in one of my clubhouse rooms. Well, since we only had two, I should be able to identify it better. In our first clubhouse room, she reminds me of Holly Flax on The Office. And I know you weren't into that show, but part of Michael Scott's persona was that he was this genuine, authentic dork and often a social jackass. And then come, the fifth or sixth season, they introduce a female character that's just like that.
So, dork or no dork, maybe her match is still in the mix. Let's talk about Greg for a minute. He got the first impression rose on night one. When this whole Carl thing went down and she was upset, he kind of ran to her side, did some consolation. He's the macaroni necklace guy. I know you didn't love that, but I think he seems kind of like maybe a viable option for her. What do you think?
I really have a hard time with that macaroni necklace thing. It just colors the way I look at the guy. And that's because I'm a...
Between you and me, and I already kind of forgotten about the macaroni necklace, and if they end up getting engaged at the end, by that point, I would definitely not know who gave her the macaroni necklace. So maybe this is going to be a problem for you, is you'll remember the details and hold it against people.
Well, come on. You're going to give me a macaroni necklace? And I know that they all have to come with some sort of angle. And that's why I agree with you. I think that in a weird way, this girl got put in a box because she may have thought it was a good idea, but she's now being put into the sex positive box, and that really isn't her. And you'd hate to think that that was one of the reasons why she got cast in this season, but it's Hollywood. That's how people get cast. People get typecast all the time, and although they're disgusted with it, sure, it carries their career. So let me give you a good story. David Spade, he lives here in Scottsdale. I've seen him out numerous times. He was the guy on Saturday Night Live all those years ago that would do these really degrading, negative limericks on the news show. He had his own segment. And, I've seen him in interviews where 3 or 4 weeks into doing it, he was already disgusted with it. He was already getting a lot of animosity and hate from people in Hollywood who he was ridiculing, and their friends and people associated with them in the business. But it was so popular and elevated his name so much, he couldn't get away from it. And Lorne Michaels was saying, no, you've got to do this next week. You've got to do this next week. We've got to find more people. We've got to find more angles. And he absolutely hated it. But it gave him that platform, so much so that he ended up getting typecast into movies, right? And he was somewhat of that guy. And I think that she's probably in the same boat, right?
Yeah, just riding that wave a little bit. It's too bad that they didn't characterize her more as what I saw her as being during that James season, which was that advocate, again, that lone voice that was willing to stand up to a lot of mean girls who were acting like a mob, because she was that too. Caitlin Bristow, one of the names you can't remember, who is co-hosting with Tayshia, she was the first kind of sex-positive role model on The Bachelorette, and she was the first who we knew slept with more than one person in the fantasy suites. So it's interesting that Caitlin is on this season with Katie, and probably no mistake, because if it goes in that direction, I expect Caitlin will be the one to usher her through those choppy waters of what happens when you start exerting your sex positivity, I guess. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that.
I like the way you tried to put some kind of politically correct spin on that, when what she's really doing is, in contemplating the man that she's going to spend the rest of her life with, she's screwing 3 or 4 of them.
We'll see. She might not.
Okay.
I think on most seasons, I don't think it goes that way. I think in most cases, whoever is the lead probably knows by that point who they're interested in.
Well, we got away from your original point, which is Macaroni Guy viable candidate to actually end up, I guess, winning the show. I don't even know if they call it that, but getting the final rose and getting engaged to this girl. After that episode, which, by the way, I will admit, I had to fast forward through many a part. For a 2-hour show with probably 50 minutes of commercials, I might have watched 45 minutes of content. And I do want to bitch about that for a second. Hold on. We're going to talk about who we think is going to be the guy, but I have to go on a little tirade. 2 hours. This is like the Super Bowl for women. This is what the Super Bowl is like. When you want to just watch the game and it's so chock full of advertisements and so chock full of crap because so many eyes are on it. That's what this program is like. There are a shitload of commercials during this thing.
Do you think there's more than other shows?
I absolutely, I'm 100% convinced. Because as someone who's fast forwarding, see, that is how dedicated you are and interested you are in the show, that you don't even mind the commercials. You are like these NFL fans that disgust me, that will sit through 3 hours of commercials to get an hour of NFL content.
No, but if the show starts at 8, I might start watching it at 8:45, and then I just fast forward through the commercials.
But don't you notice how long you are fast forwarding through those commercials? It's not like a 2-minute...
I don't notice the music either. Apparently, I noticed nothing. I don't know.
You're just so excited about seeing what kind of dress she's going to wear in the next segment that you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't love the silver dress from this week. I made a note, though, that I really liked the green dress from last week. Do you remember the green one? No. Okay.
No,
okay, so
I do not remember.
Are you done with that? Did you get it out?
Okay, I did get it out that this is a woman's Super Bowl, and just like the football fans that I have lambasted in other episodes of my podcast, you are part of the problem. You love the show, and you'll sit through commercials, and you'll sit through terrible music, and it doesn't even bother you, and you're just so excited about the next segment.
Because I'm an optimist. Because somebody might fall in love.
Oh, dear God, girl.
I think, I don't know. I really do love that. I really do love when they fall in love. Not every time, but most times in the final episode, I shed a few tears. Like, it honestly, it really gets me. Sweet.
All right. Well, authentically, I do hear in your voice that you feel that way. And I do see that there is a level of optimism in that. And I wish that I wasn't just so disgusted as I was proceeding through this television program that I couldn't, for a little while, feel that same way.
So I think it's too early to judge if you might have some sort of an emotional connection or not. Number one, we don't know where Katie's season is going, so maybe you won't. Or maybe she won't, right? But if it does get to that place where things are starting to get real and they meet each other's families and it seems like it might be something viable, we'll see. We'll see how you feel. You don't have to cry at the last episode. No crying required. But maybe you would just feel like, oh, that's kind of cool. Two nice people found each other in an unconventional way. It's kind of great.
Okay. Again, that is truly being an eternal optimist, because I don't even know that I'm going to be able to make it past the next episode of this program, much less get to the end. By the way, I will... So we were texting back and forth when I told you, I don't know if I can make it. How many more episodes are in this season? And you came back and said, I don't know. I immediately went out and looked it up. The most episodes in a season have been 13. Okay, 13 2-hour episodes.
Yeah.
See, you're looking at it from like the substantive, like, oh, well, what about this? And whose season? All I saw was the number 13 and that they were all 2-hour episodes. And I was like, Jesus Christ. Okay. I mean, War and Peace isn't that long. You know, the Exodus was not that long for Moses and the Israelites. Like, this thing goes on forever.
But we don't know how many are going to be in her season, right? If they wrapped early, maybe it won't be 13.
God, I hope not.
The other thing that we haven't really talked about today is Chris Harrison's departure. And I was a huge fan of Chris Harrison, and I thought Chris Harrison brought a certain tone to the show that I like. Caitlin in particular. Tasha's okay. I don't think they bring the same tone to the show, and I think that's unfortunate, because I think Chris Harrison, he brought a little class to it. He was a really leveling, balancing sort of influence that would come in these kind of chaotic times. And he had a very centering way about him. And I think this show will miss that. Hopefully at some point they will replace him with someone, but I don't know. For diehard fans, it's hard to accept a replacement. At least Caitlin and Tayshia, they're enough different that it doesn't feel like they're not trying to be Chris Harrison. They're being themselves, and it's kind of silly and it's not the same, but they're not trying to be him. But I really do miss him because I think that was a great part of the show.
Well, I have nothing to say about that because I never watched the show when he was on it. So
okay, if you have Netflix, you could go back and watch an old season.
Wait a minute. They actually have the reruns of that show on Netflix?
I think so. My daughter watched a season. Jason Mesnick's season, I think.
My God. So now I know what hell is going to be like for me. It's going to be me in the middle of Disney Park, the most crowded day that you've ever imagined at Disney. And then on every television screen, they're going to just have reruns of The Bachelor and Bachelorette.
Okay, I'm not wishing anything bad upon you, but if you ever find yourself with like a foot in a boot, maybe just keep it in mind. Like if you're in bed for long periods of time, you might check it out. Go backwards in time and see how great Chris Harrison was. You'll agree with me. He was kind of great.
I don't know if that's going to be foot in boot or lobotomy is probably a more accurate medical condition that I'd have to be in order to sit through that show. But, well, look, it's been great. Thank you so much for coming on my little show. I'm endeavoring to continue to watch this show, and if I can make it another 3 episodes, I'd love to have you back on for another recap.
All right, let's see how it goes. Let's see how you do.
And I'm very happy for you and the progression of your career, and as a clinician, whatever clinician you decide to be, I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Act 2. I can't express to you how happy I am that Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow admitted they are full of shit.
My library of podcasts is rather small, but if you've listened to more than 2 to 3 episodes, you realize that I have but a low opinion of the cable news network. The cable news network is the McDonald's, is the Burger King, and unfortunately is probably more akin to the Jack in the Box of news and journalism. Trending, as the kids will say, trending recently has been arguments proffered by MSNBC on behalf of one Rachel Maddow. Arguments in a defamation case. The specifics of that case were with regard to this OAN network. I'm not even going to go into the great detail about the network or what was alleged. But the fact of the matter is, Rachel Maddow basically made allusions in her television program that OAN was some sort of Russian-funded propaganda network. MSNBC and NBC, its parent, hired lawyers, and they filed responsive pleadings to the defamation lawsuit filed by this network. And what did those pleadings state? What were the arguments proffered in defense of Rachel Maddow? In sum, these attorneys argued on behalf of their client, Rachel Maddow, Your Honor, dear court, this is infotainment. This is not news. This is not journalism. What this woman proffers to her audience is entertainment based on popular culture, on news topics, but it is not in and of itself news. And here's the best part, dear listener. The attorneys argued no reasonable person believes or would take as true the information, the opinions provided by this person. This is infotainment. Reasonable people who watch this program take it for what it is. Infotainment only. Guess what, dear listener? That argument worked. The court bought in hook, line, and sinker. The court held, yes, this is infotainment. No reasonable person would believe or could believe that what Rachel Maddow offers is news or journalism. It is infotainment alone, and any reasonable person understands that you cannot accept what this woman offers as the truth, or for the truth of the matter asserted. Let's take a bit of a walk down memory lane. One Tucker Carlson found himself in the exact same situation 18 months ago. And what did Fox News, or Fox, the parent company, do? In response to a defamation lawsuit, Fox hired lawyers. The lawyers drafted pleadings, and they made arguments. What were those arguments on behalf of one Tucker Carlson? Well, those arguments were that Tucker Carlson is infotainment. Tucker Carlson does not offer facts, is not reporting the news, and is not a journalist. No reasonable person listens to Tucker Carlson and takes what he is saying as true or for the truth asserted in any of the matters. It is infotainment. And guess what, dear listener? That worked. The court bought in hook, line, and sinker. The court held that yes, no reasonable person listens to Tucker Carlson and thinks this is being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Anyone who watches Tucker Carlson and is a reasonable person knows that it is purely infotainment. How do you feel about that, dear listener? How do you feel about the court speaking to your neighbors, to your parents, to your coworkers, to your siblings, to people in your community, to people in your state, to people in your country, that no reasonable person takes for true, takes for the truth of the matter asserted anything offered by one Rachel Maddow or for one Tucker Carlson? Their attorneys have stated plainly, in writing, in a pleading, to a court of law, these people are full of shit, and any reasonable person watching them knows they're full of shit. It's just all in fun. It's just infotainment. Is that what your neighbor thinks, dear listener? Is that what your mother or your grandmother, your uncle, your father, your coworker? Is that what people in your community think? Is that what people in your state think? That this is infotainment? That there's no truth to the matter? By way of the argument made and the judgments rendered, there isn't a judge in a state or federal court that knows what the hell a reasonable person is. It's an Ivy League, ivory tower bullshit legal standard that doesn't mean anything. Half of the ire in this country about immigration is stirred up by Tucker Carlson. You think the people listening to that think it's infotainment? Half of this nonsense about Russia basically having its tentacles in and above all of our institutions, the president, the media, that the specter of Russian interference is looming over every element of American life. Do the people that hear Rachel Maddow spitting out as much night in and night out, do they believe that's infotainment? Do they believe that she's just providing entertaining content? Alex Jones got divorced, and in his divorce hearing, his wife came in and said, yeah, this maniac that you see on the internet every day, well, that doesn't dissipate when he opens the front door of our home. He's equally as maniacal when he opens that front door and comes in and addresses me and comes in and addresses my kids. He's equally as maniacal when he's at home. It's not an act. It's who he is. What did Alex Jones do? Well, Alex Jones did what any smart person does in this country. He lawyered up. And what did his lawyers do? Well, they filed them some pleadings. And they made them some arguments. What do you think that these lawyers did in these pleadings? What were their arguments in this divorce matter? It's all infotainment. Alex Jones is full of shit. It's infotainment. no reasonable person believes that he is actually offering news, that he's a journalist, that any of the things that he says are true are offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Well, in that instance, it just didn't work, because it wasn't a defamation case, it was a divorce matter. And the judge in that matter found this maniac is a maniac. And he is a threat to this woman. And he is a threat to his children. And he's not getting custody. And he's going to pay a shitload in alimony. And he's going to pay a shitload in child support. Although rare, sometimes courts get it right. Rachel Maddow, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, none of these assholes would have two nickels to rub together if the people who didn't follow them, who didn't tune in every single night, think that they believed everything that they were saying, they were offering truth, the truth of the matter asserted, and that it was all based on fact, that it was all based on news, and it was all based on the research that they had done as purported journalists. I vacillated on which way I wanted to go in presenting this segment, in talking it through with you, dear listener, in writing it out, trying to figure out what's the greater evil here. Is it that the courts rendered what could be observed as an asinine decision, in that reasonable people did not see this as any more than infotainment, that Rachel Maddow, that Tucker Carlson were no more than news actors, than entertainers? Or was it the true reasonable person standard? Was it that the courts actually got it right, and all they did was identify that there are millions and millions of unreasonable, stupid assholes in the United States of America, unreasonable, stupid assholes that couldn't see past the fact that this was purely infotainment, that Rachel Maddow, that Tucker Carlson were completely full of shit? That's a noodle scratcher, isn't it? Maybe the courts are right. Maybe no reasonable person sees anything, hears anything that Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson says or does, and thinks this is more than infotainment. This is news. This is journalism. And therefore the court got it right. So there's 50, 60, 80, 100 million stupid assholes in the United States of America. The stupid assholes should not affect the reasonableness standard. We should not move the needle on what a reasonable person might do, might say, might think, might evaluate. We shouldn't move that needle based on the fact that we have tons and tons of stupid assholes now in this country. To me, it's a very interesting position. Again, it isn't whether or not people take it as true. It's whether or not a reasonable person would take Rachel Maddow, would take Tucker Carlson as true, as accurate, as offering news, as being journalists. I have to admit, after having gone through all the mental exercise, I'm still undecided. In trying to see the positive here, in trying to see the glass half full, maybe this is actually helpful insofar as more and more people are now coming to the realization that the things that they see on these news networks, these cable news networks, this is no more than the food that they're getting at McDonald's, that they're getting at Burger King, that they are getting at Jack in the Box. There is no healthy menu. There is no calorie counting. When these corporations have to defend that, the service, the product, they admit as much. This is all bullshit. No reasonable person takes it as the truth, and therefore we shouldn't be held liable. And it shouldn't be that the stupid assholes that can't see past it should be the standard bearer. I pose this question to you, dear listener. Are you one of those stupid assholes? Is one of your siblings, is a parent, is a coworker, is a neighbor, is a community member, is someone in your state, is someone in your country one of those stupid assholes? This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.